I feel like it's a dream come true. It's the best feeling in the world. I don't know how to describe it.
Kristen Faulkner.
She will definitely be going for this one.
Kristen Faulkner going solo.
She wants to mop up all of those points.
She takes the gold medal. An opportunity here to try and go solo and accelerates yet again.
Top of the leaderboard with this ride.
I think Kristen Faulkner, for me, is one of the most exciting riders in the peloton.
Big day out here for Kristen Faulkner. This is a great move now from Kristen Faulkner. Driving for home. That was an astonishing attack. Kristen Faulkner takes it for EF Education Cannondale.
Kristen Faulkner, welcome to the Ultimate Cycling Show. This is a massive fangirl moment for me, I have to say. I can feel my palms sweaty even as I applauded.
Oh, it's mutual. It's mutual. I see you on TV just as much, you know, so.
We're not involved in it. Yeah,
I'm on these
yeah.
This
Hi.
is Matt, this is...
Nice to meet you.
This is Adam.
This is Matt.
Awkward intro.
1 week after the junior, forgotten names.
I have to explain though, because I've been following Kristen's career since she turned professional. And I've just been in absolute awe of everything that you do. And I remember, I say since you turned professional, you really, for me, jumped onto the radar a year deep whenever you did your second Tour of Flanders. Second Tour of Flanders, top 10? Top 10. And we were like, hang on a minute, where has this lady come from?
You are such a piss arse. This is unbelievable.
No, honestly, no.
She's never been like this.
No, Kristen knows this though, because I am in awe. Like, when you start looking back then, and I was in the cycling podcast at the time, we were looking back at, where she's come from. Harvard. Yeah. Venture capital.
Business.
Like proper established in the outside world, and then comes in, smashes it, second Flanders top 10, and now, a couple of years later, Olympic champion. Like, you're just actually amazing.
Hold on.
So welcome.
What were you doing at Harvard?
I was studying.
Obviously, but no, obviously.
Do you mean what was she studying?
Yes, obviously, not what were you doing, not like, just walking through,
Sorry, nice campus.
Sorry, anyway, back
Making
to
a lot of friends,
studying?
going
perfect.
to, I was studying computer science, and I went into venture capital right after, so I moved to New York City for 2 years, and...
Hold on, right. Computer science, explain this. What's computer science? You're laughing at me like you know.
Science of computers.
Yes, exactly, but...
It's software engineering, so I was going to,
No, I'm sorry, I'm just laughing at your shock at everything that's come out of Kristen's mouth. That's what I'm actually laughing at.
Harvard
It's
to do
beautiful.
computer science is like... nuts to me. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Why I had that intro now.
Yeah,
Well, I had
amazing.
this moment. Yeah,
Forget
keep
about
going.
cycling. Welcome to Not Cycling Show.
Actually, I was on a podcast one time and they asked me, what's harder, competing in the Tour de France or studying for a Harvard CS final? And I was like, probably Tour de France.
What's the biggest learning from Harvard that you could apply to what you do now? Or are they so separate they're not really comparable? But are there any skills that have come across?
I think being very objective about my strengths and weaknesses and what I needed to work on, and just being able to see that in a very objective way and not take things personally, and just say like, I'm really bad at this, I'm really good at this, okay, let's get better at it, and I think that comes from, you have to be humble, like when people around you are so much better at things, you kind of just accept that, okay, I'm bad at this, now I can get better, and being comfortable not being the best at something and knowing that if you just work at it, you can be. I had a friend one time actually, and we were doing this problem set, and I was like, this is so hard, I don't even know where to start. And he's like, yes, that's the point though. Like, you don't always have to know the answers, you don't always have to know how to, you just...
Welcome to my world.
Because hello. Like, you try a few different things, you see what works, and you just keep going, and eventually something will stick. And I think I really appreciated that conversation, and it had a pretty big impact on me, because I think the same was true with cycling. Like, you don't always know the answers in life or in whatever it is you're doing, but if you just keep showing up, keep trying your best, eventually you'll become smarter at it, you'll become better at it, and it'll start to click.
I want to talk to you about your Olympic victory, because we were there, obviously, and it was just such an amazing, amazing experience. It was an amazing race. I want to know what that felt like on the inside, and I'm always really curious as well, whenever you've done something as epic as that, right? And there are so many montages that you've probably seen already of you winning. and you'll have seen the version of you winning from the outside, you know, the camera version with the commentary. How much of your memory of that day and those moments is actually the projected memory that you've now watched back, and how much of that is your lived experience?
My lived experience was so different from
Was
what,
it?
Yeah, from what people see. Like so the day of the race, I remember, you know, so we were staying outside of Paris because we were staying near the Velodrome, which was about an hour away. So I didn't actually spend that much time in Olympic Village. I wasn't around a lot of the Olympic hype. We were pretty removed. And I remember driving in that morning, and I was just really calm. And people were saying to me afterwards, "Kristen, you were so calm that morning." And I was like, "Yeah, I just felt like serene inside, you know." And then, you know, we went to the race, and I just remember being very much in my own head, in my own space. And then in the final kilometers of the race, like I made my attack, and I was just so in the zone. Like, I didn't look back. I didn't hear the crowds. You're just so focused on your legs and the mission and the task ahead.
You didn't hear the crowds.
Like, you hear them, but you're just, it's like you have two sets of ears. Like, one that can hear it if you want and zone it out, and the other one that's just tunnel vision to the finish line. And so my experience in the race was just this kind of tunnel, at least in the final moments of the race, I was like counting to 10, just trying to cut the time down because it hurt so bad, you know?
So what do you mean you were counting to 10? I find that fascinating.
So in rowing, but when I was in college, we would have these things called power 10s. And the coxswain, who's the kind of the rower who sits on the front of the boat, they would say, okay, power 10. And it would basically mean everyone in the boat does 10 really, really hard strokes. And we do it to try and, you know, surge forward. And sometimes we do it during the really hard part of the race when people are starting to fade. Sometimes we do it if we want to intimidate the other team by gaining on them. And it's basically everyone is all in for 10 strokes. And so when I'm in kind of a solo attack when I'm racing, I will count to 10 as a way to kind of focus on my breathing, buy time, focus internally, and just try to give myself a rhythm to just stay focused. And so basically in the last 3 minutes of the race, I was in so much pain and I was focused. I just counted to 10 over and over and over.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it?
Love that.
You didn't look back. I remember watching it, and you went, and you just stayed in, you just kept looking forwards. I thought, when's she going to look back? You didn't look back.
Yeah.
You crossed the line, and then you only looked, well, you didn't even look back when you crossed the line. It was just an astonishing, I don't know, you're purely, it looked like from the outside you were just in this space that nothing else mattered apart from your own individual effort.
It wasn't even a race because it felt like you weren't trying to beat others.
I think in racing, it can be so hectic and chaotic and crazy. I mean, the same is true in business. Like, there can be so many different factors, you know, your competition, your customers, all these things, supply chain. And in racing, you have your competition, you have the course, you have the fans, you have the parkour, like everything, and, you know, your feeding and your bottles. And I think the more you can simplify stuff and just really hone in on what is the most important thing right now in this moment, and keep the other stuff in mind. But I think the ability to prioritize in the moment allows you to really stay calm.
Have you learned that that's how you best operate?
I think it comes from just really knowing my body and trusting that I know what I need from my body. Like, I can listen to the signals in my body, you know, and I've been an athlete my entire life. So I know when I'm good at it. I know when something feels off. I know when it feels good. I know I know what makes me feel strong and what makes me feel weak. And I think if you have spent your entire career being told what to do at any given moment, you're never given the freedom to listen to your body, to trust your body, to ask yourself, how does this feel in the moment? And so I think for me, because I've been an athlete for so long, doing endurance sports without a radio in my ear, you know, I guess in rowing you do have a coxswain, but you know, I was a swimmer and I was a runner, and so I had done these endurance sports my whole life, and I think, you know, when you're given the freedom to learn your body.
Do you think your competitors know how you race now? In terms of, say, an attack went on a climb and they were like, okay, she's not responding about no, she'll come back.
Yeah, I think they, I mean, definitely, but I think that also it's fun for me because it forces me to try and learn in new ways. Like at the national championship, I won in a sprint against Lauren Stevens, and for sure she was expecting me to attack in the finale, and that's exactly why I didn't. And so I don't have a great sprint right now, as you saw at Tour of Britain, but it's something like I've worked on a lot over the winter. It's better than it was, and it's because I want to be able to sprint from a reduced bunch and not have to rely on attacking the whole time. And I think, you know, at the Tour de France last year, Blanca Voss was right on my wheel when I went to go make an attack, and she's like, I learned once last week, I'm not going to make the same mistake again, you know? In the beginning of last year, I had said to my performance director, I said, I want to learn to win in different ways. And so actually she had me practice attacking last minute multiple times in races in the beginning of the year, trying to do these sub 5 minute attacks. And she's like, you're doing team pursuit. Like, you should be able to do this. And the first few didn't work. And she was like, just keep trying. And so then, excuse me, the first one, I tried kind of a last maybe 1 or 2K attack, didn't work. And then the next time I tried it and it worked. And then the next time it worked again. And then I went to the Olympics and I was like, well, now I know I can do this. I'm gonna try it. And this year it's the same thing. Like, I think you always have to be willing to experiment with new things. And it's not gonna work the first time, but if you keep doing it, you'll get better.
You've got such an engine, haven't you? It's annoying how good you are. But it is though, like you're the one person that it's like, within the men's cycling world, it's like a Filippo Ganna sort of thing. You can time trial, you can do a late attack, you can get up there in bunch sprints and fast finishes if you need to. But for the majority of people, they are good at one thing within cycling. And you know that they're good at that because that's what they always excel in. With you, you're like, is she attacking? Do you know what I mean? You just don't know, but
so
you're like...
stealthy. You don't...
You can't give you any room.
It's true that a lot of people, I think, forget to focus on their own race and they focus on everyone else. And I've actually heard people say, like, I remember when Demi was winning, like when she did the Ardennes Triple, afterwards someone was like, oh, why doesn't someone just sit on Demi's wheel the whole time? And just like, and I was like, because then they'd be racing her race. Like, they'd be racing it in the best way that's for her. And I think, like, when you become so focused on the competition, then you start racing their race. You don't race your own race. And your own race will look very different from theirs. You might want to attack at a different spot. You might want the climbs to be harder or easier or whatever. And I think when you focus too much on other people, you forget how to shape the race to be what you want it to be.
Tell me you do the team talks. Tell me you do the BSing on the side.
I was just thinking, we need to rebrand this show. It's not the ultimate cycling show, it's the ultimate philosophy show.
Cycling is my sport, it's the sport of my family. I was born, I would say, in cycling. My father was a cyclist, my mother was a cyclist. When I grew up, I was the one to put the numbers on the countdown, on everything. So yes, I love cycling. Just before this interview, I've been for 45K today riding my bike. So I still have the passion for cycling and I still love this sport more and more.
Buongiorno, bonjour, hello. The Tour de France is always very special. The hype is real.
This tour was pretty amazing. It's just out of this world, actually.
We are so lucky in cycling to have a worldwide event like the Tour de France. It's just not a cycling event, it's a worldwide event. 50% of the visibility in cycling is the Tour de France. So it's great that we have this opportunity. It will bring investors. You have 12 million people along the routes. But on the other hand, when you have a very, very strong event, that can be also a challenge for us because the Tour de France is so strong. So we need to take the wheel, in fact, of the Tour de France to enlarge cycling.
What are we watching here?
If you chase your dreams, you can catch them.
It's true that if you have the World Tour and you have sometimes 2 events, even some weekend we can have 3, but it's quite confusing. So we probably have to create a kind of UCI Champions League in the future to maybe promote all the top events in the World Tour. Of course, you have 9 events that are at the top. That's the 3 Grand Tours, Tour de France, Vuelta a España, Giro d'Italia. You have the 5 monuments, and you have the UCI World Championships. What is difficult is we are not the owner of the events. It's completely different. When you have the UEFA Champions League, the UEFA, they are the owner of the event. We are not the owner of the events. So then you have to discuss with stakeholders, organizers, and they have the media rights. We don't have. And then start the complexity because they don't want, for example, us to commercialize their own rights, and this is something we have to respect also. But the teams, they also want to have one part of the cake. So this is where my job is very complex because we have existing positions. I said, look, if you want to take the money from the other side, it will not work. The only way it will work if we can grow the cake. So it's not so easy, to modify when we have 150 years of history behind. And also because there are usually 2 stakeholders, we have 3. We have the organizers, the teams, and the riders. and it's more complicated to change, but I do believe that we can continue to grow. We are a very popular sport. So I believe there is a big gap in between where we can be or where we should be and where we are. So would to copy, what is sure is football is in another planet. However, you can see that football can even continue to grow. They have new products like the FIFA World Cup for clubs. So what we also delivered with this combined UCI World Championship by putting all the World Championship together, I think now we have an event that will continue to grow and that will become one of the major events worldwide. And I think it's a big asset for cycling. There was a meeting between One Cycling and the UCI, but not only the UCI, we brought also the riders, teams and organizers, because it's important to have them around the table. We welcome any investment in cycling, but it has also to respect some rules. We have also to be careful about not destabilizing the Olympic movement, going through or bypassing the international federation. We need to understand more what is the business model of One Cycling in a way. We don't want to have a kind of private league that will decide about the calendar, that will in fact take everything from cycling. It's not exactly the Bernie Ecclestone with Formula One. So I think this will not happen really in cycling, but it's true that in golf it has been a big challenge for them. It's not that we don't want to have evolution within our sport or a new business model, but we need to understand what is this new business model. Because you have more stakeholders, you don't directly have a contract with the golf player that can join your tournament or your series. In cycling, it's not exactly the same. You have teams, you have organizers, you are not the owner of the Tour de France or Giro d'Italia. So cycling is not for sale from the UCI. So there are discussions. As you can imagine, it's not so easy. There are some tensions also, but I hope we can find solutions together.
I find it really, I don't know what to make of that 50%. Did he say 50%?
He said 50, yeah.
Of the public perception and global coverage of cycling is consolidated in the Tour de France. Like in one way, yeah, brilliant, because it's a beautiful bike race. Holy moly, how on earth do we balance that out and make people care about the rest of the sport? How do you make them care?
It's a hard one. I was chatting to, I can't remember who I spoke to the other day, but it was a manager, owner of a team. And from a team's perspective, in terms of the team's visibility,
I don't remember who that is, but you remember exactly what they did. What was his name, Matthew?
I thought that was a really bad Adam,
He's sly. He's good. He's sneaky.
Yeah. Not that good. We caught him.
80% of the team's marketing thrust, the visibility is the Tour. Just to counter that, it's even more for some teams. That's where all the value lies. It is amazing. But what that shows is the strength of ASO. We talk about all the different stakeholders that David was talking about there. But ASO have have the strongest hand.
How much of that, though, is a self-fulfilling prophecy? Because if the Tour de France is a concentration of marketing budget, of global attention, and the teams are saying, OK, not even 50%, 80% of our marketing goes into the Tour de France, well, actually, all you're doing is consolidating even further the prominence and importance of the Tour de France, no?
Well, and also now teams are spending, 3 weeks at altitude before the Tour de France. They're skipping other races to bring their top teams to the Tour. Suddenly the calendar is evolving. People are changing their calendar and when they peak in the season so that, all their best 6 riders can be peaking at the Tour, because if they win a stage, that's way more visibility for their sponsors than otherwise. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure on the teams, but also the riders to get visibility at the Tour and to neglect other races that might even suit them better because of the dynamics, with sponsors and visibility.
There has to be some way, and I don't know what it is, but what he's talking about in terms of a Champions League of cycling with the 3 Grand Tours, the 5 Monuments and the World Championships. That makes sense, to be perfectly honest. The unfortunate thing is, in that Champions League model, races like Strade Bianche would not be top tier. And that's, for me, really sad. If you've got Lombardy, for example, that's given preference over a race as exciting and dynamic as Strade Bianche. But there has to be some sort of a linear story to follow. It is so hard, and I've said this over and over again, and we're all preaching to the converted, right? We all know that there needs to be an easy story to tell. I cannot explain. We're talking earlier about taking really complicated things and making them simple. How do we make bike racing simple?
Our sport's greatest strength is also its biggest weakness.
Yeah.
It's so disparate. You've got all these different stakeholders, RCS for the Giro, Flanders Classics for the Classics. You've got the UCI, the governing body, who don't actually own the rights to the events that they oversee. So, but this isn't any individual's fault. But over time, you've got these pockets of power that are generally at odds. So you've got these different stakeholders with different objectives that don't align. And that's the problem for the UCI, to bring them together. And the overarching thing is, to your point, is we need to simplify it. So more people, off the back of Unchained and stuff like that, look at it and think, how do I follow cycling? But right now, where do you even start? So it's like creating that, isn't it? Yeah.
But this is exactly it. I've got so many people who've said to me that they've gotten into cycling because of Unchained. And then they go, okay, what next? Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know where to go next. That's bonkers.
Well, where's the league or whatever?
Waiting for the next Tour de France. That's insane.
Yeah.
But also, this One Pro Cycling project, I just want to know what it's about. I want to know. Yeah. Obviously, the second points are clearly ASO and or the UCI, because in that interview, I don't know if Lappartient mentioned elsewhere that we've not seen what his take on One Pro Cycling is, and obviously he probably can't say anything, but the fact that he's even referring to a separate Champions League, does he mean, is that a metaphor for One Pro Cycling, or is it something that's completely different? There is just absolutely no transparency for fans of the sport as to where the sport is even going to go. And I find that really challenging.
And what we don't want is to break away. We don't want these breakaway leagues like you suggested, but coming to one objective, coming to one agreement with all the different stakeholders is hard. Mm-hmm. It's really hard.
I don't think it will ever.
I actually think you're right. I think it might not ever happen. We might have to be left with this beautiful chaos.
I definitely think that's the way it's going to be for the rest of the time. I really do. I can't see RCS, ASO, UCI ever coming to an agreement where they all chuck into one pot. And
I just wonder how sustainable that is going forward, because, we've grown up through variations of a generation or overlapping generations, whatever, whereby people used to consume cycling media in very different ways, right? So people would actually read full articles about stages that had happened, right? Or then they would sit down and watch full documentaries, or people would watch, hours of cycling content. Nowadays, genuinely, I look at my kids, your kids, if you cannot get them within 30 seconds, you're gone. Mm-hmm. They've moved on to the next thing. So it's easy to say it might never happen. Well, then what? Because is there a place for that? Where does the next generation of cyclists come from? Okay, it might come from parents who are encouraging their kids to get away from the screens and do something healthy instead. However, I just don't see how you can feed that critical mass without having a media proposition that is more tailored towards how we consume media now.
Yeah. And I understand what you mean. I think there's a purity to bike riding, where the calendar's a mess, we don't get all the riders together.
The purity is the chaos, though. And I feel like Lappartient is mentioning 150 years of history. That is exactly the problem. And I know purists will hate it. I know, I get it.
But it is the reason why we love the Tour, the Giro so much, is because of the pioneering days of these races. If you do scratch the surface, just move away the marketing side of sport. If you start to read and understand the history of the sport, that is why we care so much.
I agree and I disagree though, Matt. If you look at the...
I'm talking from like an old school.
Yeah.
Absolutely, but you look at the numbers who've come to follow the Tour de France off the back of Unchained. There's nothing historical in that series. It is all about the people. Yeah. It's about the narratives that you get to tell about the people. If you look at, first season of Unchained, and you've got Jasper the disaster, and then Jasper becomes the master. You're following the people... And that's what's interesting. And you can follow people's story. We can follow your story, Kristen, if we know what sense to make of your racing schedule. Yeah. If we don't know, it's really hard. Yeah. And yes, then you can get into the history of it. Once you've hooked people with the generational stars, you've got to understand why they're racing against each other in different ways, in different races, across the season. Because otherwise, how are you getting the hook for the kids? How are you getting the hook?
It's money. It's all about money. It's about all the big stakeholders protecting their own bit of the pie.
But this is where I do agree with Lappartient.
No,
you need to make the pie bigger.
It's how on earth are you going to do that when like ASO aren't going to budge? RCS, well, to be fair to them, will just go where the money is. Let's be really honest, because they do. It's like they'll adapt their ideology according to where they get the money from, which is the way that we're moving towards, I think. And it's very, very interesting.
We are the governing body of cycling worldwide. So we govern the sport, we enlarge the sport, we organize also cycling within the Olympic Games, and we always try to open, I would say, new territories. We have 205 national federations. That means that all the territories or all the countries in the world, they have a cycling federation. I am their representative in the discussions with the IOC, with various stakeholders. But in the meantime, we always try to develop cycling worldwide. For example, in Africa, we'll have the UCI World Championship over there. You know, that was a dream also to bring the UCI World Championship in Africa, but also to develop cycling in Africa. Now we have 54 national federations. That means all the countries, they have a cycling.
I love the ambition of it.
We have a project, Africa 2025, to bring a lot of athletes at the top level for the UCI World Championships, and we'll have this UCI World Championship. So to develop cycling in Africa, it's something I love to do. And the other mission is more humanitarian mission. What we've done with these ladies from Afghanistan, I've been personally involved days and night to bring the cyclist ladies outside of the country. We had two of them, the two sisters Hashimi, to have a wild card to take part in the Olympic Games with the Afghanistan jersey, to have them in a breakaway during 110K, and one was ranked at the end. That's great, and I'm happy to tell you that we will have also a national championship of Afghanistan in June. So yes, that's also another mission. So where we are now with women's cycling compared to 8 years ago, in fact, it's a huge, huge, huge gap.
That was an outdoors ascent for the history books.
She's enjoying this, and why not, Demi Vollering, take a bow.
And Lisa Longo-Borghini right clear to secure the Maglia Rosa for Italy.
Katia Niewiadoma wins the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift.
Now we have the Women's Tour de France, we have the Vuelta, the Giro, Milano-San Remo came back this year, we have Paris-Roubaix, so it's really booming.
That was absolutely epic from start to finish.
Credibility is always a big challenge for the UCI, for cycling, and even more globally for the sport, because we came, from old days where our sport was clearly linked to doping, and now we are the sport of anti-doping. My predecessor has done also, Brian Coxon, a lot to fight against doping. That was a big challenge, because you can lose your credibility in 5 minutes, but it will take you 20 years if even you can regain completely your credibility. So this was one of the challenges we had to face. We are a very big sport if you look at the popularity of the sport, but the economy of our sport is not so strong. And there is a disbalance in between the popularity and the economy of our sport. The budget of the UCI is close to 50 million, which is not so huge, but we need to have more. But also that this money will benefit, of course, to the riders. They are the key players, I would say, but also for us, because we use 100% of our Olympic revenues for the World Cycling Center for development and solidarity. And if we bring athletes from new countries, that will help cycling to grow. But for this, you need money. So we have money, but if we have more, we can potentially do more. And when I was elected, I was clear also to our staff and our UCI Director General. I said, look, I want the UCI to be independent from the Olympic revenues, and I want to use this money, 25 million per cycle every 4 years, for the development. So if we have more money, then we need to invest more into development to give more opportunities to some riders all over the world. What we are doing, for example, with Africa 2025, We have 20 riders selected from various countries, and then we will bring these athletes to the highest level. Now they are 4 months in France, and now they started to win races, and then the goal is to bring them at the highest level to take part in the World Championships, why not the Olympic Games. 35 athletes in the last Olympic Games have been, at one moment, part of the World Cycling Center. So we gave them the opportunity that without money, it would have been impossible.
Yeah, you got to say in terms of development and trying to grow the sport at a grassroots level beyond the traditional heartlands, it's hard to fault, really, isn't it? They're very different jobs, trying to streamline the professionalisation of the calendar and growing the grassroots, and I think they seem to do a really good job of that.
Yeah, I mean, from what he said there, that the Afghanistan example, and it's just worth pointing out as well that the Afghanistan Women's Championships is going to be held outside of Afghanistan for obvious reasons, and held, I think it's in Switzerland or France, not too far from the UCI. So projects like that are amazing, and they do that's political activism.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
it's actually, and Lappartient's going to mention himself there as well. He's got his own ambitions. Let's be honest, but he was integral to that. They actually had to get the women out of the country under darkness, because of the situation of the Taliban there. So that was really legitimate. But to see the amount of athletes that are now racing internationally, several are on World Tour teams, a couple are on pro teams as well, continental teams, is fantastic. You cannot fault the UCI at all for that. That's wonderful work.
How do you feel about the World Championships in Rwanda? Are you planning to ride them for a start?
Yes, I am. I feel, so for me, just as a woman, I just want to feel like I can go ride a 60-kilometer, 100-kilometer training ride and be safe. That for me, that's the biggest thing. And if I can do that when I go, then I'm supportive of it. But
do you have doubts about that at the moment?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah.
And what's that based on?
Well, yeah, there's violence next door happening, and just if it's a country I've never been to, and if there's any chance of, people. If there's any chance of like $15,000 bikes wanting to be pulled off the side of the road, then it makes me a little bit concerned. But I will go if it's held there this year. Yeah.
We did 20, 30 years ago. We had the World Championships in Colombia, and we did have to go training under an armed guard because there were teams that had their bikes stolen, and there was areas that were ungovernable. Even for the police. So we went out training. We had to book a slot with a jeep with armed police officers. And if you went out on your own, you had to have like an armed guard. So we went out training in 1995 at the World Championships. Interesting. And there was a point, I wanted to go a bit further, that said you cannot go beyond this point. We can't even, it's all the drug cartels back then. It was just like mid-90s, the country was changing, but still essentially in ruins. But that was interesting. So,
you see what's come out of Colombian cycling.
But there is a risk, and it's certainly not for everybody. So I think we all applaud it, but it's still, the fact that we're having to discuss it now means there's still going to be quite a lot of trepidation, especially from governing bodies sending their riders who they're responsible for. So it's a difficult one.
What kind of communication do you have with with your national governing body about it?
So I've asked USA Cycling, what's the situation? They said it's almost certain that it's going to happen, and a lot of federations, I know the US is only going to send max 4 riders, no matter how many slots we get. I think the UK is also only going to send 4 riders. And so I think a lot of teams are sending smaller groups of riders, partially because it's a bit more expensive maybe, but also because they want it to be super safe. And so they need more staff, more resources to manage those riders. And so it's probably going to be a much smaller field than what you normally get, and that'll also change the dynamics of the World Championship. And so I think I think the dynamics will be different this year if it's in Africa.
I think the thing is, though, to flip that around, we also have, say we, because I won't be racing there, but there's a collective responsibility to do something about the disparity in the world in cycling. So teams, I think, need to represent in some way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, when are we going to affect that change? But that still isn't it's still very difficult, but we need to invest in it as well, don't we? Ideologically and physically by sending teams. But the budgetary side, there's a lot of smaller countries that cannot afford to go. As well, so
and that also is unfair in its own way, right?
Of course.
I remember when it was in Australia, it was also prohibitively expensive for a lot of places, and I think if we want to make a more equitable sport, we also need to think about the budgets of smaller countries. It's
totally.
It's not just, and so you're balancing the equity of bringing in, nations like Rwanda and having the World Championships there, but also the budgets of smaller countries who can't afford to travel to these places.
That goes for everything as well as what we forget, like TV motorbikes. There's one company that's used throughout the whole year within the cycling races. They're going to have to get them to Rwanda somehow. And it's just TV motorbikes without everything.
I guess it all
else
becomes
in
so
there.
much more expensive, doesn't it? Yeah.
I do hope it happens, but there's a part of me that just can't see it happening.
Cycling's also different from other sports. I mean, if it's football or soccer, as we say, like you're in a stadium, like it's an enclosed environment, it's safe. In cycling, you go out training and you have to go somewhere rural because you're not going to be training in the middle of a city, and that inherently is less safe because there's less surveillance as soon as you get out, right? And so it's a very potentially unsafe sport compared to other sports in that way, and that there's
less cars on the road.
Yeah.
Public cars on the road.
Yeah.
They might just, like you say, see a 15 grand bike. I want that bike. Stop and take it off you.
And not even anything about Rwanda, but like being alone in a rural place in a foreign country as a woman, with a $15,000 bike, anywhere in the world where that was the case, I would feel unsafe. And then on top of that, when there's fewer people going, fewer staff going, it's almost fewer people in the sport who maybe to go on a ride with or to share cars with and stuff.
Yeah, there's going to be some protocols, isn't there?
I think it really changes the dynamic of the World Championships. It'll be a really different and interesting dynamic this year.
Yeah, I just keep everything crossed that it goes well, because if it does, it's a brilliant, bold move, isn't it? And I think the potential for change, the potential for developing the sport in undeveloped areas like that is massive. And even seeing that those videos of kids running along the side of the road, if it works, it will be beyond beautiful.
They do love the cycling. If you've ever seen images of the Tour of Rwanda, it's absolutely insane.
Beautiful.
They love it, and it's just hold on to that for a minute. But fingers crossed.
Yeah. What's the rest of the season look like for you then? Because you're going to be at the Tour de Suisse, aren't you?
Yeah,
and the FAM.
Bit of a last minute call up for Tour de Suisse. I did Tour of Britain, and then we had 5 riders for Tour de Suisse, and I was like, well, it can't hurt to bring me, so just bring me. And also, it's a lot of the same girls that are doing the Tour de France Femmes, so I decided I wanted to go get a little more racing under my legs with them. So tomorrow, actually, I'll be racing Tour de Suisse, and then I don't have
tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow.
Jesus.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty quick turnaround.
I mean, dedication to the show.
Exactly.
And then,
we're worth it.
Exactly.
What can you say?
You're worth it. You're worth it.
Clearly. What a compliment, really.
Kristen was telling me about how she's had experiences of
how I would, as in
has found herself in a position where she's in a ditch, throwing her bike into a ditch and crying. And I feel like I felt seen.
I didn't throw my bike into a ditch. I stepped into a ditch to get off the road.
Sounds a bit defensive.
Embrace it.
Tour de France Femmes in 2022, I want to say. So I did the Giro, and then I had COVID, and then the day I tested negative was the first day of the tour. So I was completely cracked, basically. I had no day in a 30-day span where I wasn't racing or with COVID. So I started the Tour de France Femmes, still kind of had COVID, but was getting, I was no longer contagious. Anyway, so I was completely exhausted, just so tired. So I was riding in the back the whole tour. And if you're riding in the back, you're caught behind a crash. And this was the tour where there were a lot of crashes. So I was caught behind 3 different crashes, covered in bandages, still getting over COVID, completely cracked. And on the last day, what climb did we have in 2022? Yeah. I was just in the worst physical condition and mental condition of my entire life. I was completely cracked. And I just started shedding a few tears. I was like, just get to the finish line, get to the finish line. So I'm crying, I'm actually crying. And I go by these fans, someone snaps a photo. And so then I get this fan mail last year, and I open it up, and it's a photo of me crying on the balcony, covered in bandages, next to me with my Olympic whip. And it was actually very cathartic. I was like, this is why you keep going.
Do you know what? That's really lovely, actually. Do you think any of the Galácticos in men's racing cry on the bike? Ever?
I think Remco probably has.
Do you think so?
I can imagine Remco having that.
I think you see the chaps generally, if they've had to pull out of a race, it's quite emotional.
Yeah.
And like Simon after the Giro, that was. So I think on the bike maybe not so much, but the immediate aftermath of either winning or seeing or something. Yeah, or having to pull out.
It's so raw.
Yeah, it's generally the extremes.
What did we make of stage 1 of the Critérium du Dauphiné? I know you've been busy, so you haven't been able to see it, but I know you were following from afar. Just seeing first start, Jonas taking off the front. I mean, I'm here for that. And then the only rider's been able to stay with Tadej, Remco, Mathieu there as well, Buitrago. But I just felt like such a little appetizer for what's to come. No.
This is that, for me, that little attack that Jonas did, that's worth the £31 a month for TNT. And I don't mean that in a way, we've had a lot of controversy, but I mean that in terms of...
Fair play, mate.
That's like cycling. I wasn't watching live, I saw the replays of it, and I was like, this is everything about cycling
It's everything.
that I love about it. And I mean that, I'd make a joke with it, but just seeing those guys starting to play at their best, almost at their best, it's like, ooh, and it is a play, because it's not the Tour de France, it's like a little tease into what's to come. And I honestly think, just on Jonas, he is going to demolish this Tour de France.
Do you think so?
I just think he's going to rip it up.
I feel really strongly about him.
I feel like that is not at all his characteristics.
Yeah, I know.
One single bit. And he was able to do that damage with one attack. I'm like, I'm here for this all day long. And I just feel like this Tour is just going to be...
I think you're right. I didn't see it either. I was working, but I watched it and I saw it on Instagram like you do. And then I looked at Pro Cycling Stat. I thought, hold on a minute, how did this play out?
Yeah.
So managed to patch it together and then just watched it multiple times. The way Mathieu led out, and then just the four names at the front.
Yeah.
But I think what it shows and what it should remind us of in terms of the way cycling is we need these riders across both men's and women's sport. We need less overlap. I know there isn't quite as much in the women's game anyway, but in the men's side of things, we need the superstars battling it out.
Yeah.
You know,
Away
maybe
from
not
the
all the
tour.
time, but away from the tour,
Yeah.
we need everybody together because that encapsulates what's beautiful about our sport. It was a moment where the greatest athletes of riding against each other, not in isolation, in a sport that's overly fractured. The sport's beautiful, but it also needs slightly redefining and bringing together. And that moment, that stage one, is basically proof of concept. We need everybody, all the hitters, racing together, and they just get stuck in.
Well, like, we should not be waiting from last year's Tour de France to this year's Critérium du Dauphiné, almost a year later, 11 months essentially, before we're seeing the two best riders of their generation coming up against
I think
each
they
other.
feel the same as us. That's why they race the way they race.
Yeah.
And not as if they feel a responsibility to put on a show. It's because each other, they draw the best out of each other.
And Jonas said that before the Dauphiné. He said it. He said he's a better bike rider because of Tadej.
But yeah, I agree with that. But there's a side of this where we see Tadej all the time through the classics, where he's amazing. But then there's a Jonas, which he's purely a Tour de France rider.
He's a different bike rider.
So I think if they were together all the time, we might not get the show that Tour de France we're expecting because he's forced to do other races. So there's a certain aspect where, yes, I do want to see him clash more, but I also love that he can go away and prepare for this 21 days and then come in the best, into the best of the best.
I agree with you, mate. I agree with you, but I think it's more broadly the fact that we need the A-lists.
Yeah,
like
it doesn't
more,
have to be Jonas against Tadej.
Just more.
But more of the Wouts and the Mathieux and the Remcos and Mads all together, you know?
Yeah.
I also think it's so fascinating that you can get the two best riders at the Tour who prepare in completely different ways. One's racing all spring, doing lots of different kinds of races, single day, punchy, whatever, and then someone else who's basically in training mode for the bulk of the year. And to have two totally different preparations for the exact same race.
I like the fact that you've got the biggest prize in men's sport, the Tour, and you've got, surely there must be one logical path to get to optimum fitness. And yet the two finest riders in the world, who both won a couple each, 2 or 3 each now for Tadej, are approaching it, like you said, Kristen, at completely different ways. One is like more methodical, kind of logical, scientific, conservative, you could argue, and the other is just like...
Sod this, it's a race.
He's like, like party poppers all over the shop, and just like rainbow bands, and I absolutely...
All the confetti cannons.
And I just love it.
Like for men's cycling especially, from Team Sky days, from when Wiggins won in 2012 up until 2020, that was the set way. Everyone had to do long hours, big zone 3 efforts.
Other teams were starting to do it as well, weren't they?
Well, I think they've caught up, and as a good example, Team Sky now Ineos, they've just carried on doing the same thing until the last 2 years, roughly.
But they've not been winning.
Exactly. So I think now it's changed massively, but I think people are getting a hold of, that works for you, that works for you.
Yeah,
We don't care how it
individualised.
works. just do it.
And there's also the element of like, if this is what makes you happy, then this is what's going to work for you. And if you I think if you show up to the start of the season and you're cracked because you've been training in a way that's just emotionally draining for you, you're not going to perform.
But that's it. And we always talk about what the magic ingredient must be in a winning formula, and we can never quite quantify it or even name it. But I bet it's just a version of that. It's a sprinkling of happiness.
Yeah.
It's happiness, whatever works for you.
Yeah. I think it's unlocking each individual to having a team around you to have freedom to express yourself as an athlete and as a person at the same time with all the other stuff in mind. And it's different weights and measures for each individual person, isn't it? So there's all this information we've got, all that's driven by science, but then ultimately it's not one size fits all.
I had this before.
And it is massively important, and I like the fact that is now important and disruptive in itself.
So I think there are different ways to do things and different things that work for different people. And my hope is that we can maintain that and not have everyone feeling like they have to prepare for everything and eat the same thing and do all that as the sport becomes more professional.
Allow riders to do what works for them. I think we've cracked it. Cycling unlocked.
You're welcome.
There you go. Thanks for coming.